The text came through on a Tuesday, just after 3 p.m. I was in the middle of repotting the Meyer lemon tree on the sun porch, my hands deep in rich, damp soil, the scent of citrus and earth a quiet comfort. The phone buzzed against the wrought iron table, a rude vibration in the peaceful afternoon. I wiped one hand on my jeans, a small, unconscious smile touching my lips. It's a reflex, a muscle memory of the heart. My son's name on the screen always did that to me. The smile died before it could fully form. It wasn't a text, it was a screenshot. A screenshot of a real estate listing for a charming bungalow with a wide porch in a town 400 miles away. Underneath it, just 2 words from my son, Michael. "We're moving." And then a follow-up message that stopped my breath. "Chloe thinks it's for the best, a clean break. We need to build our own life without complications." I stood there, soil crumbling from my frozen fingers. The world narrowed to the glowing screen. Complications. I was the complication. The grandmother who lived 12 minutes away, who picked up Leo from school twice a week, who kept a fully stocked toy chest and a cookie jar, whose guest room was perpetually ready for sleepovers. I was the emergency contact, the backup plan, the soft place to land. Now I was a complication that required a 400-mile clean break. If you've ever had the ground pulled out from under you with such casual, surgical precision, you know the silence that follows isn't empty. It's full of a roaring, deafening truth. If you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of love and betrayal and rebuilding from the quiet rubble, subscribe to this channel. Stay with me. You're not alone in this. I don't know how long I stood there. The soil dried on my skin. The lemon tree, half tethered to its new pot, seemed to lean away from me. A clean break. The words were so final, so sterile. They carried the distinct, dismissive tone of my daughter-in-law, Chloe. This was her language. Michael, my sweet, aimless boy, would have fumbled, would have hedged, would have said something about opportunity or space. But a clean break, that was Chloe's clinical, efficient handiwork. My mind, scrambling for a lifeline, latched on to a detail. The bungalow. It was beautiful. It had a swing on the porch and a magnolia tree in the front yard. It looked like the kind of home you see in picture books. It also looked expensive. My Michael, a freelance graphic designer with unpredictable income, and Chloe, a part-time marketing consultant, couldn't afford that on their own, not without help. A cold, sickening understanding began to dawn alongside the heartbreak. I didn't reply. I placed the phone face down on the table, picked up my trowel, and finished repotting the lemon tree. I packed the soil around its roots with more force than necessary, my movements sharp and precise. I watered it until water streamed out the drainage holes, a miniature flood on the terracotta saucer. Then I washed my hands, scrubbing the dark earth from under my nails, watching it swirl down the drain like the last remnants of a life I thought I had. The betrayal was twofold: the leaving and the not telling. The planning that must have gone into this, the realtor visits, the mortgage pre-approvals, the decisions made over dinners I wasn't invited to, in the home I helped them buy. The guest room I painted myself, a soft sky blue for Leo, had become a war room for my own exile. That night, I didn't cry. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Michael with his multiplication tables, where I'd planned his father's funeral, and I made a list. Not an emotional list, a financial one. For the past 5 years, ever since Leo was born and Chloe decided to cut back her hours, I had been their silent financial backbone. It wasn't a loan, it was a monthly transfer, automatic and unquestioned, from my account to theirs. "Just to help with the gap," Michael had said once, his face flushed with shame and need, "just until Chloe gets her promotion." The promotion never came, but the transfers did. $2,500 every month, like clockwork. I opened my banking app. The history was a long, scrollable ledger of my love, quantified. Invoice number 8472, transfer to Michael and Chloe Dawson, $2,500, 10/15/2019, and every month after. I'd been a senior analyst for a logistics company for 30 years. My pension was comfortable, but it wasn't limitless. I'd been drawing from my savings, from the careful nest egg I'd built for my own later years, to fund their right now. I'd seen the evidence of my money in their lives: the new sectional sofa, Chloe's expensive haircuts, the fancy stroller when Leo was born. I'd told myself it was fine. It was for my family. What was money for, if not to smooth the path for those you love? But now that money was smoothing their path away from me. That bungalow's down payment. My money was buying the distance. The anger arrived then, hot and clarifying. It burned away the initial shock, the grief, leaving behind a hard, clear surface. I was not just a heartbroken mother. I was a bank that was about to close its doors. 3 days passed in absolute silence. They didn't call, they didn't come by. It was as if, having fired their warning shot, they were waiting for me to surrender, to absorb the blow and somehow bless their departure. I used the silence. I called my financial advisor, a no-nonsense woman named Rita. I laid it out for her. My son's family is moving across the state. I need to restructure my finances. Effective immediately, I am ending the automatic monthly transfer to his account. Rita didn't blink. Okay, Elena, I've been wondering when you'd mention those. Do you want to discuss recouping any of it? The question startled me. Recoup? It was a gift, wasn't it? But a gift given under false pretenses, under the implicit understanding of proximity and shared life. No, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. That's gone. I just need to ensure my own cash flow is secure going forward. Consider it done, she said. And Elena, good for you. After the call, I felt a tremor go through me. This was the first concrete action, the first real boundary. It felt less like an act of strength and more like a surgical amputation, necessary but agonizing. The first crack in their silence came not from Michael, but from Chloe. It was a text, polite and poisonous. Elena, hope you're well. Michael mentioned he sent you the listing. Exciting, right? We'll need to schedule time for you to say goodbye to Leo before the move. Things are quite hectic with the packing and the loan process, so let's coordinate soon. The loan process. There it was, the confirmation. I stared at her words, say goodbye to Leo, as if I were a distant relative, not the woman who had rocked him to sleep, who knew his favorite dinosaur was a Parasauroloff, who had a standing Wednesday adventure day with him. My fingers itched to type back a fury of questions. How could you? Why there? What did I do? But instead, I channeled Chloe's own clinical tone. Congratulations on the new home. Let me know what dates work for you for a visit with Leo. I didn't ask about the loan. I didn't mention the stopped transfers. I let the silence on that front hang, a ticking clock only I could hear. The visit was set for the following Saturday. They were coming for dinner. A casual farewell, Chloe had called it. The phrase tasted like ash. I cooked anyway. I made Michael's favorite pot roast, the one his father used to love. I made garlic mashed potatoes. I baked chocolate chip cookies, Leo's favorite. I set the table with my good china, a foolish, hopeful gesture. I was draping a veneer of normalcy over a crater. When the doorbell rang, my heart seized. I saw Leo's face first, pressed against the glass of the storm door, his nose squished, a giant grin on his face. "Grandma!" he yelled, the sound muffled. I opened the door, and he launched himself at my legs. I bent down, inhaling the little boy's scent of him, grass and grape juice and unconditional love. "Hello, my sweet boy." Michael stood behind him, holding a bottle of wine. He looked tired, and he couldn't meet my eyes. "Hey, Mom." He leaned in for a stiff, one-armed hug. Chloe was last, her smile a perfect tight curve. She was dressed in expensive athleisure wear, her blonde hair in a sleek ponytail. She handed me a bakery box. A pie. Didn't want you to do all the work. The air in my foyer was thick with everything unsaid. We moved to the kitchen, the familiar terrain now a minefield. Leo chattered about preschool, about his friend Jake, about the moving truck. "We're gonna have a big yard, Grandma, for a dog. Daddy says maybe." "That's wonderful, Leo," I said, my voice only slightly strained. Dinner was a study in surreal politeness. We passed dishes, we complimented the food. Michael ate with the gusto of a man seeking comfort, avoiding the elephant in the room by focusing entirely on his plate. Chloe picked at her food, making light, brittle conversation about the new town, the excellent school district, the wonderful sense of community. Finally, after the pie was served, Michael cleared his throat. The sound was like a starter's pistol. "So, Mom, the house. It's a really great opportunity for us, a fresh start." I nodded, wiping my mouth with a napkin. "It looks beautiful. How did you find it?" "Chloe's friend from college lives out there. She connected us with a realtor." He took a gulp of wine. "The market's hot, but we managed to get an offer in." "The down payment was the tricky part," Chloe interjected smoothly, her eyes on me, sharp and assessing. "But we've been scrimping and saving for a while now, making sacrifices." Sacrifices. The word hung in the air, bloated with my hidden subsidies. I felt a flare of anger so bright it whitened my vision for a second. I took a slow sip of water. "I'm sure it was a challenge," I said, my tone neutral. "It's a big step." "It is," Chloe said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "And it will be so good for Leo. A stable environment, room to run, the schools are exceptional." She was selling it to me as if I were a skeptical investor. She paused, then laid down her fork. "It's also a chance for us to finally be independent. You've done so much, Alina, and we're so grateful, but it's time we stood on our own 2 feet." It was a masterpiece, a statement that simultaneously offered fake gratitude and framed my lifelong support as a form of infantilization. Michael winced, staring into his wineglass. "I see," I said quietly. "And when is closing?" 3 weeks from Friday," Michael said, finally looking at me. His eyes were pleading, but for what? For understanding? For compliance? For me to keep funding this independence I was apparently stifling? "We didn't want to drag it out," Chloe said. "Clean break, you know." There it was again, the phrase. My eyes flicked to Michael. He flinched. "Well," I said, pushing my chair back and starting to gather plates, "I wish you all the best with it." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I read Leo 2 bedtime stories in the blue guest room, my voice catching as I read the final lines of Goodnight Moon. Goodnight noises everywhere. I kissed his forehead, breathing him in, trying to memorize the weight of his head on my shoulder. "Good night, my sweetheart. Grandma loves you to the moon and back." "To the moon and back times 100, he murmured, already half asleep. When I came downstairs, Chloe was already putting on her jacket. "We should get him home. Big day tomorrow." Michael hovered by the door. "Thanks for dinner, Mom. It was great." I simply looked at him, the boy I'd raised, the man who now saw me as an obstacle to his clean break. The silence stretched, uncomfortable and raw. Chloe broke it. "We'll be in touch about coming to get Leo's things from here." She meant the toys, the clothes, the little bed, the evidence of his life in my home. "Of course," I said. "Just let me know." They left. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening to the sound of their car pulling away. The house was full of the ghosts and the evening, the smell of pot roast, the echo of Leo's laughter, the chillingly polite conversation. I walked back to the kitchen. There, beside Chloe's barely touched slice of tie, was her phone. She'd forgotten it. I stared at it, a sleek black rectangle of temptation. It buzzed once, lighting up with a notification preview, a text from someone named Lisa. "Did you tell her about the bag?" The bag? Curiosity, a sharp and ugly thing, pierced through my numbness. I knew I shouldn't. It was a violation, but they had violated so much. My finger hovered over the screen. It wasn't locked. Chloe always forgot her passcode, relying on facial recognition. I tapped the notification. The text thread with Lisa opened. Lisa, did you tell her about the bag?
God, no, that's none of her business. But didn't she, what she gives us is a gift. We don't have to justify what we do with it. It's not an allowance. We're not children. Still, a $4,000 bag is a hell of a gift to yourself. I earned it. After putting up with her constant help and interference for years, I damn well earned a little luxury. It's the price of her guilt. Michael would never have the spine to stop her, so I might as well get something pretty out of it. The words swam in front of my eyes. $4,000 bag. The price of her guilt. I earned it. A roaring filled my ears. I scrolled up, my hands shaking. Pictures. A beautiful, structured leather tote from a designer brand I recognized from magazine ads. Chloe had sent a photo of it in its dust bag. My new baby, she'd written. The date on the text was 2 weeks ago, right around the time they must have been securing the mortgage, making the down payment. The down payment my $2,500 a month had helped save for. While I was clipping coupons, worrying about my savings depletion, she was buying a $4,000 handbag and calling it her earned luxury for tolerating me. I felt physically ill. I placed the phone back on the table exactly as I'd found it. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was financial, and it was grotesquely disrespectful. They weren't just leaving me. They were spending my security, my future peace of mind, on their own vanity and their curated new life. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table as the night deepened, the revelation cold and hard in my gut. This wasn't about a mother being too clingy. This was about users who had drained me dry and were now moving on to a new stage, one where my utility had perhaps run its course. The clean break was about severing the last ties of obligation, now that the financial spigot was presumably expected to continue flowing long distance. But the spigot was off, and they didn't know it yet. The next morning, as the sun painted the sky peach and gold, Chloe's car screeched into my driveway. The doorbell rang, insistent and panicked. I opened it, already dressed, composed. "Your phone," she said, breathless, her perfect composure shattered. "I think I left it here." "Yes, you did. It's on the kitchen table. I put it on the charger for you." She brushed past me, her eyes darting around until she found it. She snatched it up, her thumb immediately unlocking it. She scanned the screen, her face pale. She knew. She knew I'd seen it. The knowledge flashed between us, electric and damning. She turned to me, her chin lifted in a defiant, shaky arc. "You went through my phone." It was lighting up on my table. The notification was visible. I didn't open anything. The lie was smooth, a small protective revenge. Let her wonder how much I saw, how much I knew. Let that uncertainty eat at her. Her eyes narrowed. "Our finances are our private business, Alina." "I couldn't agree more," I said, holding her gaze. "Absolutely private." She faltered, confused by my calm, by my agreement. She expected tears, accusations, drama. She was prepared for the emotional mother. She wasn't prepared for this quiet, immovable wall. "We'll be by next week for Leo's things." She clutched the phone like a talisman. "I'll have them boxed up," I replied. She left without another word. That was the minor turn, the moment I first felt the slightest shift of power. It was small, just the seed of a secret I held, but it was mine. The following week was a flurry of packing, not for them, but for me. I packed up Leo's belongings with a methodical sorrow. Each toy, each tiny pair of socks was a memory. I didn't let myself dwell. I boxed them, labeled them, and stacked them in the garage. I also began packing up the version of myself that existed only for them, the perpetually available babysitter, the emergency fund, the emotional dumping ground. The day they came for the boxes, Michael came alone. He looked haunted. "Chloe's got a migraine," he muttered, not meeting my eyes. We loaded the boxes into his SUV in silence. The physical weight of them, the literal handing over of my grandson's presence from my home, was almost unbearable.
When the last box was in, he stood on the driveway, scuffing his shoe on the pavement. "Mom, about the move. It's not. We just need. You need a clean break, Michael." I finished for him, my voice gentle but firm. "I heard you." He winced. "It sounds so harsh when you say it." "It is harsh." I crossed my arms, not against him, but to hold myself together. "But it's your decision. I hope the house is everything you want it to be." "Mom," he took a step forward, a flicker of the boy he was in his eyes. The transfer, it didn't come this month. Is everything okay with your bank?" There it was, the question, the real reason for his solo visit. Not to mend fences, to check on the supply line. The clarity was so brutal it was almost peaceful. "Everything's fine with my bank," I said. "I've simply restructured my finances. The transfers have stopped." His face fell, a mask of genuine panic sliding into place. "Stopped? But why? Mom, we're counting on that. The new mortgage, the moving costs. We budgeted for that." "You budgeted with my money?" I asked, the question soft, deadly. "Without asking me? For a move you planned in secret to get away from me?" He had the decency to flush. "It's not like that. It's just, you've always helped. We thought, we assumed." "You assumed wrong," I said. The words were final. "You're a grown man with a family, Michael. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet, as Chloe said." He stared at me, a stranger in her mother's skin, the woman who had never said no, the woman who had always found a way to fix it. That woman was gone. "You're punishing us," he whispered, his voice thick with a sense of injustice. "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "I'm not. I'm choosing myself, for the first time in a very, very long time. I wish you well, Michael, truly, but your financial well-being is no longer my responsibility." He got in his car and drove away, the SUV sagging with the weight of my grandson's childhood and the end of his financial dependence. I watched him go, my heart a tangled knot of grief and a terrible burgeoning freedom. The move happened. The social media posts began. Pictures of the bungalow, Chloe posing with her designer tote on the porch swing, Michael looking strained painting a room, Leo grinning in the magnolia tree. The captions were full of hashtags. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag fresh start, hashtag our forever home. I watched it all from a distance, a silent spectator to the life my money had helped launch. The calls started about a month later, not from Chloe, from Michael. His voice was always tense, always circling the same issue. "Mom, the HVAC unit here is ancient. We're looking at $7,000 to replace it." "I'm sorry to hear that, Michael. That's a tough expense." A pause, heavy with expectation. "Yeah, it is." Silence. "Well, talk soon." Another time, "Leo needs braces. The estimate is astronomical. Orthodontics are so expensive nowadays." "They are. We're just exploring our options." "I'm sure you'll find a way." He never directly asked. He was testing the fences, seeing if my restructuring was temporary, if the old softness would return. Each call was a little more desperate, a little more pointed. Chloe's perfect life was showing cracks, and my money wasn't there to spackle over them. The climax came 6 months after the move. They showed up, unannounced, on a rainy Friday evening. I saw the rental car pull up, saw the 3 of them huddle under an umbrella and dash for my porch. My heart, which had begun to heal into a quieter, scarred thing, gave a painful lurch. I opened the door. Leo looked taller. Michael looked 10 years older, shadows under his eyes. Chloe's smile was a brittle, cracked thing. The designer tote was slung over her shoulder, a stark symbol of everything. "Elena," Chloe said, her voice saccharine, "we were in the area for a conference. Surprise!" They weren't in the area. There was no conference. This was a calculated ambush. I let them in. The familiarity was jarring. Leo ran to the sun porch to see the lemon tree, which was now thriving, covered with small green fruits. I made tea. The silence was oppressive. We sat in the living room. Michael couldn't settle. Finally, he blurted it out. "Mom, we're in trouble." I sipped my tea, waiting.
Chloe took over, her businesslike mask slipping to reveal raw panic. The mortgage on the bungalow is more than we anticipated. My consulting work has dried up. Michael's clients are slow to pay. We're behind, 2 months behind. If we don't make a significant payment by the 15th, we'll get a default notice. I looked at her, then at Michael. I'm very sorry to hear that. That's a tough expense. It is, Michael said, leaning forward, his hands clasped. Mom, we need help. A loan, just to get us over this hump. $15,000. We can pay you back, with interest, I swear. I placed my cup on the saucer with a soft click. The sound was definitive in the quiet room. I can't do that, Michael. Can't or won't? Chloe's voice was sharp, the politeness gone.
I turned my gaze to her. Won't. My resources are committed to my own security now. I'm not in a position to lend that kind of money. Your own security? Chloe laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You have a paid-off house, a pension. You sit here in your comfortable life while your son and grandson are about to lose their home. Chloe, please, Michael muttered, but the anger was in his eyes too, directed at me. You chose that home, I said, my voice still calm, though my pulse roared in my ears. You planned it, you bought it, you moved to it for a clean break. The financial responsibility for it is yours. You helped us before, Michael cried, his composure breaking. For years. Why now? Why are you doing this to us now? Is this because you're hurt? Because we moved? This is cruel, Mom. This was the moment. The truth, held for so long, rose up in me, clean and cold and sharp. I'm not doing anything to you, I said, each word measured. I am simply no longer doing for you. There's a difference. For years I gave, and I was happy to do it. But you didn't just take my help. You took it for granted. You planned a life away from me while spending the money I saved for my old age. You called me a complication. You bought a $4,000 handbag with the money I sent for groceries and bills. I looked directly at Chloe, whose face had gone bone white. Did you think I didn't see the texts, Chloe? The price of her guilt? My love wasn't a gift to you. It was a transaction, and you felt you'd earned the spoils. The room was utterly silent. Michael stared at Chloe, horrified. What is she talking about? Chloe couldn't speak. The evidence of her own contempt, caught and held by me, had finally come home to roost. You felt entitled to my money, but not to my presence, I continued, my voice trembling only slightly. You wanted the funding without the founder. Well, the funding has stopped. You are adults. You will solve this adult problem. Chloe found her voice, a venomous hiss. You're a selfish old woman. You'd rather see us crash and burn than part with a fraction of what you have. You're punishing Leo for our choices. Don't you dare use my grandson as a weapon, I said, my calm finally cracking, a flash of maternal fire in my eyes. You made these choices. You wanted no complications. Well, financial independence is complicated. Welcome to it. Michael stood up, his face a mask of shame and dawning awful understanding. He looked from his wife's furious, guilty face to my resolute one. The fantasy he'd been sold, of a stylish, independent life bankrolled by a silent, distant mother, was crumbling around him. We should go, he mumbled. Michael, we are not leaving without... Chloe started. We're leaving, he shouted, a sudden, surprising burst of authority. He grabbed Leo's hand. Now. They left in a storm of slammed doors and recriminations I could hear through the glass. The rental car sped away into the rainy night. I sank onto the sofa, my entire body shaking. It was done. The line had been drawn in the sand and I had held it. It felt like a kind of death. It also felt like the first true breath of my own life. In the weeks that followed, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that they hadn't lost the house. Chloe's parents had stepped in with a loan. The strings, I imagined, were now attached to them. I wondered how Chloe liked being the complication in someone else's life. The anger and the acute pain gradually subsided, replaced by a profound and steady peace. I was no longer waiting for the phone to ring, dreading what it would ask of me. I was no longer measuring my worth by my utility to them. I poured myself into my own world. I took a master gardening class. I volunteered at the local botanical garden. The lemon tree on the sun porch produced its first full crop of gorgeous, fragrant lemons. I made lemon curd, lemon bars, preserved lemon. I gave jars to my neighbors. I started a small, informal business selling my preserves and potted herb gardens at the local farmers market. I called it Grandma's Garden, reclaiming the name with joy for myself. I made friends, women my age, some with similar stories, some with completely different ones. We had dinner, we went to movies. My world, which had for so long orbited a single distant planet, now teemed with its own life. I still saw Leo, not often, but Michael started bringing him for weekend visits, just the two of them. The visits were strained at first, but gradually they became simpler, sweeter. We didn't talk about money, we didn't talk about Chloe. We gardened, we baked cookies, we read books. It was a relationship stripped back to its essence, no longer burdened by expectation or resentment. It was fragile, but it was real. A year to the day after the clean break text, I was at my farmer's market stall wrapping up a pot of rosemary for a customer. The morning sun was warm on my back. I felt a presence and looked up. Michael stood there, holding Leo's hand. Leo held a drawing carefully rolled up. They both looked softer, less haunted. "Hi, Mom," Michael said. His voice was quiet, sincere. "Grandma, I drew your lemon tree," Leo shouted, thrusting the picture at me. I unrolled it. It was a glorious, chaotic child's rendering of the sun porch, the tree, and a big, smiling stick figure me. At the bottom, in Michael's handwriting, it said, "Thank you for teaching us how to grow." I looked at my son. Tears stood in his eyes. Not tears of manipulation, but of hard-won understanding. He didn't ask for anything, he just said, "It's a good drawing." "It's the best drawing," I said, my throat tight. I came around the stall and hugged my grandson. Then, after a moment's hesitation, I hugged my son. He held on tightly, a little boy and a grown man all at once. They stayed for lunch. We talked about simple things, Leo's soccer team, the new rose varieties at the botanical garden. It wasn't perfect, the past was a scar between us, but it was a beginning, a real one, built not on my sacrifice, but on our mutual, respectful distance and newfound, honest closeness. That night, as I closed up my stall, I looked at the drawing again, now pinned to the wall of my sun porch, next to the thriving lemon tree. The tree that had been half transplanted the day my world broke apart. Now it was lush, fruitful, resilient, just like me. The greatest strength isn't in never bending. It's in knowing when to stand straight, rooted in your own worth. I had learned to love them without losing myself, and in doing so, I had finally found a love that could actually last. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt the sting of being taken for granted by those you love most, please leave a comment below. Your experiences, your strength, they matter. And if you want to hear more stories of women finding their voice and their power, subscribe to the channel. Stay with me. There are more seasons to come, and I promise the fruit is always sweeter after the drought.